Hi, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of The Hitstreak. Check it out. I got to give a big shout out to my show sponsor, my friends over at AVLX. I also have to give a big shout out to Charles Henry and Ace Young, the amazing performers and producers of the music behind the show, as well as the amazing people that make up the Hit Lab creative team, who are the producers of the show. Folks, I have a favor to ask. If you like what you hear, and I know you do, click that subscribe button to make sure you get alerted when new episodes are dropped. Thanks for tuning in.
The real success stories told by the people who live them.
We're going to have some guests on this show that everybody knows, and we're going to have guests on this show that nobody knows yet.
One by one, Nick Hyder is adding hits to the hit streak.
Blessings, folks. Welcome back to another episode of The Hit Streak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder, and today I've got an extra special treat for you right here with me in the Hit Lab. I have got award-winning songwriter, artist, and producer right here in Nashville, Mr. Danny Myrick. Dude, thanks so much for hanging with me today.
You're very, very welcome. I'm just blown away with the new digs, man. It's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. I know I was telling y'all about it before we built it.
Yep.
And it took a while, so this is the first time you've actually been able to see it.
First time I've seen it. Last time I was here, you were just kind of starting with the room, and it was one of those walk by and look in the window of the door like, man, this is going to be cool, and to see it finished is fantastic. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much, man. I thanks to my buddies over at AVLX, they freaking smoked it, man.
Clearly, they crushed it.
They sure did.
Great.
Well, dude, I'm so excited to get you in. When we first started putting out our projected guest list, all the ones we wanted to have way back in October, you were on the very short list, and we finally gotten to a place in the broadcast in the show where it was like, it's time to get Danny in here to rock and roll, coordinate with your schedule, and go, because, like, dude, I'm so fascinated with what you do.
Yeah, me too. I'm fascinated every time I look up, like, what is it exactly that I do? Well, I appreciate it. We go back a long ways and always have plenty to talk about. And so I'm honored to be here. I appreciate you even thinking about me and reaching out. It's going to be fun.
Well, it is. It's so cool. So first of all, I mentioned that you are an award-winning songwriter, artist, and producer, right? So not everybody does all three. Is that fair?
That's true, for sure. And you know, a lot of other people do, you know, one of the three to a much greater extent than I do. But it's, you know, I've always kind of been that jack of all trades guy. I was always a hustler, and just kind of grew up in a musical family and played bass because that just was the instrument that I got at Christmas. My brother got a guitar and I got a bass guitar. My mom played piano, and I just grew up. I would sing lead on some songs. I would learn harmony on others. And as I got older, you know, my interests just varied between being in high school and my brother and I dreaming of going to Nashville to be studio musicians. And then kind of I fell in love with writing songs at 14 or 15 and started doing that. And then I loved performing, you know, still kind of get the joy of the stage lights and that whole thing. So, you know, thus I ended up doing all of them, and I love making records. And so yeah, I mean, I never was one of those people that was willing to lay the others down just to focus on one of the three. So,
well, like the stories that we're going to hear today are fantastic. But let's make sure we preface a little bit of who you are today, so that these stories will kind of, like, a lot of our audience are aspiring entrepreneurs, business folks. People come here. The emails that I get are amazing with just what the people get out of this, what the guests bring, and the inspiration, and people just getting up to go another day, man.
Yeah.
But not just get up to go. They go to win.
Sure.
They go to win. So how many I've got here, I could be wrong, but I've got here that you had at least 12 number one songs.
That's true.
That's
last count. Yeah. So
and growing, right? And growing. And you've had a part of over 100 million albums sold.
Getting close. Yeah. You know, I wish in the last several years, they still pay it on records sold or records sold the way they used to.
Yes.
And you could actually make some money on it. But yeah, so I fortunately grew up in a day and age where people bought records.
So you've been in you've charted numerous top 40 hits as a singer and performer, and then obviously the songwriter, your production stuff. You've just got done producing some stuff with the amazing Leslie Jordan.
I did, which was a lot of fun. The record we made last year in the middle of, I guess, a year and a half ago in the middle of the pandemic. Crazy time to make a record, but such a surprising thing to pop up in the middle of a dark, weird time.
Yes.
It was really, really cool. So we could talk about that in a little bit.
We definitely will, because honestly, you could probably tell Leslie Jordan stories for days on end.
Absolutely. Not as well as he could tell Leslie Jordan stories, but for sure, he brings to mind a lot. He's awesome, wonderful guy.
Well, so obviously, how long have you been in the business of music, right? So you mentioned that when did you make your first buck, I guess?
Well, okay, so it's really interesting. So my dad's a Baptist preacher, he passed a couple of years ago, but I grew up a preacher's kid, South Mississippi, and in a very, very musical family. My grandfather on my mom's side was probably my greatest influence musically. He actually made a record a couple of years ago called King of Jones County that I wrote the song King of Jones County about him. He's from a little town called So, Mississippi. Deb Holofield, Jones County, Mississippi. If any of your listeners have ever seen the Matthew McConaughey movie, Free State of Jones, that's about Jones County.
Okay.
And kind of the role they played during the Civil War. But anyway, he was like an old school, loved like bluegrass and Grand Ole Opry and all that stuff. And he played what he called a flat top guitar, like Johnny Cash used to refer to it. And anyway, so my mom played piano, and we just had this family band, and I grew up doing that, made our first record when I was 7. And my dad, in addition to being a preacher, he also promoted gospel concerts on the coast in Mississippi. So when I was a small child, I grew up on Southern gospel groups like the Cathedral Quartet and the Kingsman Quartet and the Happy Goodman Family and the Oak Ridge Boys back before they went country. And that was sort of the world I lived in. So my dad would book these concerts with these artists coming in, and then our family band would open for them.
That's cool.
And so finally, I guess probably about 13 or 14, I started paying a lot more attention to the liner notes on the back of records. I knew everybody who played on every record. I knew their names. I knew every studio, every producer, and I started noticing the songwriters. And so it kind of, I started thinking, man, it would be fun with our family band if we did original songs. So I probably started about 14 writing songs, and I ended up writing this song called Jesus is the Light. It was kind of a Christian country thing. This is after Alabama had blown up, and I was a big fan of Alabama. And so that started happening in the Christian music world, where some of these bands that were formerly like quartet, they would start, acoustic guitar and drums and stuff. And so there was a group called the Dixie Melody Boys that changed their name to the DMB Band, and they reached out and wanted to cut my song Jesus is the Light. And I didn't know anything about how that worked, but I ended up signing a pub situation with them. They took the song and put it out on the radio, and it was number 1 on the gospel charts for about 3 months. And
that's awesome.
About 9 months later, I go to the mailbox and had a check for like $4,000.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, what's this for? And it was from BMI, and I realized that it was songwriter royalties from Airplay. And I'm like, okay, hang on a second. If I had like 10 of these, and I was probably 17. And but that's the first money I made from it, other than just making a little money from our family band playing. But that's when I first felt like, okay, I could maybe try to do this for a living. So.
Well, first of all, it was brilliant of your dad to understand how to put 1 and 2 together to make that happen, right? So
No
you
question.
guys as openers and all that kind of stuff to kickstart everything. That's brilliant.
I mean, it's a showcase, every time. It's even like being in Nashville. It's like, from time to time, if you're playing with another artist, you never know who's going to be there from their organization. You never know if they're going to watch your show. We were pretty good for a local family thing. Really good harmonies, and we worked really hard on playing well. And
Real good.
And so, well, thank you. But so, I think that's what happened is we would be playing, and at least somebody from that headliner band would kind of hang and watch us and, want to talk to us after. And so that's kind of how it started for me getting songs cut.
Well, Lee, you mentioned the harmonies and stuff. We were listening out front. So tell them about the final track on your latest album and what that is.
Well, so I grew up in gospel music, and we played in every service my dad preached, and we were big fans of a cappella singing, and so me and my older brother Robbie kind of grew up like twins. We were a year and 10 days apart, and when we were little, my mom dressed us alike. We were very much like twins, whatever. And then my younger brother came along 10 years later, and great harmony singer and great ear. And so we just started, working on all this stuff, a cappella, and then trying to do different arrangements of it. Everything from, the national anthem to, I remember late nights riding in our bus. We would listen to radio jingles and try to learn those, like WWL, New Orleans, kind of thing. We try to do it in 3-part harmony and all that kind of stuff. So we worked up this arrangement of It Is Well With My Soul that we used to do in all our concerts. And what you're referring to is my wife Meg and I, we got married about 4.5 years ago, and had all of our friends at our wedding, obviously down on the coast in Destin. And none of my songwriter friends they didn't really know that side of me. It was fun. I had a bunch of my Nashville people come down. And so for our post-wedding thing, our reception thing, we just basically did like a songwriter round, like a guitar pull. And I'd bring up my friends. And so all my family are hearing, like, Kent Blasey married us, and he wrote not Friends in Low Places. He wrote, oh my God, I'm blanking on Garth. Ain't Going Down Till the Sun Comes Up If Tomorrow Never Comes. Mm-hmm. So my family's getting to watch my friends do this. And so I said, hey, let me get my brothers up and y'all can kind of see what we grew up doing. And so we did It As Well With My Soul, and my sister-in-law videoed it. And so I thought about having my brothers come up when I made this record a couple of years ago, King of Jones County, and maybe do that track live. And then I thought, well, man, it was so fun at our wedding. And there was one little thing, my sister-in-law started videoing it, and we missed the very beginning of the song. So I was like, well, maybe I could get my mixing engineer to kind of recreate like a record starting back in the day where,
oh, yeah.
I know a lot of your younger listeners didn't really grow up listening to LPs, but, typically what would happen is you pick up the needle on the record and it'll start going automatically. And by the time you drop the needle on the record, it's at the right speed. Well, before they had these automatic arms on these LP, these phonographs, you wouldn't do it typically, but you could set a needle on a record at stop position and hit play, and it would kind of do this sort of, kind of come up to speed. So I said, maybe we can do that on that song to kind of play with missing that first line.
So cool.
So anyway, if it's out on Spotify and Apple and Pandora and all the stuff, called King of Jones County, just under my name. But the last track is live from our wedding, and my drunk friends, praising the Lord in the middle of it. It's a lot of fun.
Well, it's beautiful, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So you got your, you sound like every businessman, every sales guy, when they get their first deal, it's like, man, if I had 10 of these, that's how we do it. That's literally the same thought process that goes along with that, right? So now you're trying to get 10, right? So, what came next? Because I met you when I was very young, and you were young.
Yeah, I was in my 20s when I met you, for sure. Yeah, you were young, and what I knew of you, obviously, the backstory on that is, and I'll go back to the other thing for those of your listeners that don't know, my connection with you is your dad, Mickey, had a connection with the publisher I was with at the time. And he just started hearing some demos that I was singing. And this was probably, I don't know, maybe 92, 91. Mm-hmm. And he started hearing my voice, and he reached out to me about potentially, working on some stuff, producing some songs with me singing, maybe to pitch an artist thing. And I really, because of the way I grew up, and, a real life-changing moment for me growing up in gospel music was then when the Eagles came out when I was a kid, and hearing all those harmonies, kind of this California country thing, man, it just kind of flipped everything for me. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So when your dad asked me about, making a record, trying to pursue an artist thing, I said, well, I don't really want to do a solo thing, but I would love to do a band. Mm-hmm. And so that's Western Flyer was my band. We started working on that, and that's how I met you, because, senior ball games and all that stuff when you were a kid. So basically, the next step for me was after I had that gospel song, I started writing more of those. First of all, using the opportunities that our family had playing in front of these artists. And then, you have a little success and some people start reaching out. And I didn't really understand the business at all. But so my first several cuts that I got, man, I was just really, speaking of Hitstreak, really, really fortunate. They were just recorded as singles. So people would hear us, the Nealons did one called Well Done, My Child. They put that out. That went number one. A group called Mid-South, a quartet that's now doing the Christian country thing. They heard a song called It's a Matter of Time. They put that out. That became a number one single. So I'm getting these royalties in, and that just fueled the fire to move to Nashville. And that was my next step was to go to Nashville. So the easiest way I could figure out to do that was to try to go to school, and I found out about Belmont. And so I moved up here when I was 19 to go to Belmont. And really didn't have much interest in school, but I wanted to be in Nashville, and that was back before it was crazy expensive. So I go to Belmont, and I go to my first class under a guy named Bob Malloy that anybody who grew up around Belmont would know. He taught music business, the GOAT, the greatest ever doing that. But in that first class, we left from there to go get our student mailboxes, right? So I go get my student mailbox, and this long blonde-haired dude comes up to me in the mailbox area and goes, "Hey, are you the Danny Myrick who had Jesus is the Light on the D&B band record?" I'm like, "Yeah, why? Who are you?" He goes, "Well, my name is Stephen Curtis Chapman." And he said, "I had 6 cuts on that record, and you got the single."
Boom.
And so, so meeting him, and he became a fast friend. And to make a long story less long, I ended up, I left town for just a little bit and then came back. But when I first saw Steven, he was like, "Have you signed a publishing deal with anybody? Are you working with anybody?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Don't do anything. Let me call my publisher." And so because of our history at Belmont, he called his publisher and said, "Hey, I've got a buddy who's a great hit Southern gospel writer. You need to meet this guy." And so I got my first pub deal through my relationship with Steven.
That's awesome.
And so, thanks to him. And that was, I was probably 21, 22 maybe. And, and that was the first time that I had a pub situation where I've got somebody pitching songs for me and getting paid to write songs, being paid very little, but paid to write songs and try to figure that whole thing out. It wasn't enough to work full time at it, but I suddenly started having a few cuts and getting some minimal hits. But, my early 20s, that was kind of figuring that world out. And, and then I just, in the middle of all that, for me, I love gospel music and grew up on it, but I kind of felt like lyrically I was in this sort of constrained place, and I wanted to write about everything to do with life. And I loved country music. And so I decided that I wanted to transition from that gospel thing into country and do the band thing, and your dad was a part of that whole thing.
Yep.
That's where that all happened with Western Flyer.
Well, you've been writing, really, really. I mean, you've been having cuts since back in the mid '90s.
Yeah, with the
in
country
country radio, right?
Started off with in the early to mid '90s with my band, Western Flyer. Me and my buddy Chris Marion got together with some other guys that we went to church with. Started this band. Your dad was working with us with that. We ended up signing a record deal. Had a couple songs out that charted that I wrote with that band. And then when we lost our deal, I was out of the business for a little bit, and then just really missed it. So I went through a whole nother section of life at that point. But I came back into the music business probably 2000, 2001. And the way that came about is a really interesting story. So when my band was out, I played bass and sang lead with Western Flyer. A band called Boy Howdy was out there and doing pretty well. A guy named Jeffrey Steele, who played bass and sang lead with his band. There was a band called McBride and the Ride.
Oh, yeah.
That was out doing very well. Terry McBride played bass and sang lead with that band. And then there was a big pop band called Mr. Mister that had blown up, and Richard Page played bass and sang lead with that band. So there was kind of this kinship with us guys who were like, man, I got the bass player, lead singer guys. And I became buddies with Jeffrey Steele back then. He was a fan of our band. So I had been out of the business for about 5 years, and I randomly ran into him at a Starbucks when I was thinking about getting back into the business. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things that I'd gone through a little bit of a dark time in my life, and making no money, trying to figure out what I was going to do for a living. I missed writing songs and missed country music. And I went back to our old manager that we had with Western Flyer, just basically took him some songs that I'd written and said, man, I need somebody to care enough about me to tell me to go to work for UPS or something, or yes, you should give this another try. And so in that conversation, this was a Thursday, and Johnny Doris, my former manager, brought up Jeffrey Steele to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, I remember Jeffrey. Boy Howdy. He goes, yeah, well, he's not in Boy Howdy anymore, but he's writing songs and he's really killing it. He's doing great. And I said, well, man, I think I still got his number. I should call him. And Johnny kind of laughed. He goes, man, you're probably not going to catch him. He's kind of on fire right now. He's kind of busy. But that was on a Thursday, and that just was, Jeffrey was the reference he gave me to kind of keep going, sort of the inspiration for me. The next morning, I'm sitting in Starbucks, and I look up, I'm kind of journaling and figuring life out, and who walks in but Jeffrey Steele, and I hadn't seen him in 5 years. So I went up, and I'm having this whole dialogue in my mind going, man, he's not going to have any idea who I am. He's not going to remember me, blah, 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 blah. So I go up and I tap him on the shoulder, and he turns around and he goes, Danny Myrick, how the hell are you? And I'm like, I'm great.
That's
Man,
incredible.
it's good to see you. And I'm great. And, and he goes, well, tell me you're still writing. You're still writing, right? And I'm kind of like, well, man, that's a long story, kind of whatever. And he grabs me by my shirt and gets in my face and goes, don't you quit, dude. Don't you freaking quit. Like, what can I do? How can I help? Don't dare quit. And so that was the real turnaround for me. And I sat down with him for about 3 hours at Starbucks. He canceled his write.
Wow.
And I just caught him up on a bunch of I just was in a tough place. I was starting all over, and I kind of lost everything with where I was, and I was kind of talking back through that with him. And he said, man, meet me back here next week, same time. Let's grab coffee. So a week later, we come back in. At this point, I have no contacts in the music business. This is probably 2000, 2001.
Yep.
And I come back and I meet Jeffrey. We're having coffee, and he's telling me kind of about the pub deal he's doing, what's going on with him, catching me up on his hits, and I realize just how on fire he is. And he goes, what are you doing the rest of the day? I'm like, nothing. Putting that in job applications, I don't know. And he says, hey, why don't you come join me for my co-write? And so I'm like, okay. So I go to this publishing company. At the time he was signed with, called Windswept Pacific. And I go in, and he's writing with Tim Nichols, who later wrote Live Like You Were Dying with Craig Wiseman. So it's me and Jeffrey Steele and Tim Nichols. And I literally have nothing going on. And we start working on this song. And for some reason, man, talk about providential things. For some reason, that day, the Tennessean was doing an article on independent publishers.
Okay.
So in the middle of our write that day, a camera crew comes in, and they take a picture of me and Jeffrey and Tim, and they're basically there to talk to Steve Markland, who was the head of Windswept at the time, and to ask Jeffrey a couple of questions. But the next day in the the living section of the Tennessean, on the front page, was me and Jeffrey Steele and Tim Nichols.
How cool is that?
Which gave me all the credibility in the world that I was still doing it. And, and the song that we wrote that day, we ended up having Gretchen Wilson pre-record deal. She sang the demo, and that's a whole nother story for another time. We'll talk about her in a little bit. But anyway, that he basically went into his people at Windswept, and he said, man, this is my guy. I believe in what he's done. I was a fan of his band, and I want to sign him. And in all honesty, they were kind of not on board with it, and he basically pushed it through. He made it happen, and it started for me.
So you mentioned multiple times, we talk a lot in here about the importance of relationships, the importance of who you surround yourself with. Basically is like, that's kind of the direction that you're going to go. Somebody told me once, show me the 5 people that you hang out with and I'll show you your future.
Absolutely.
Type thing, right? So
no question.
You mentioned all these folks that obviously, I mean, you have to have a pretty solid impact on somebody for years to go by, and they make it in the process to remember you.
Well, it's really funny. Man, some of these things, when you're trying to pursue some sort of art for your career and you're trying to figure out a way to monetize it, number one, I still sometimes just have to look at the fact that I live in America where, at least through the course of my life, we have prioritized not just art but commercial art, so where you can, whether you're writing songs or making movies or writing screenplays, whatever, that you could really kind of go, man, should I consider doing that for a living? I think if I'd been born somewhere else, or being a potential commercial songwriter, vocational songwriter, might have never entered the thing. But man, I just look back at these steps that really kind of are beyond me, or in bigger hands than mine, whatever you believe in terms of spirituality and religion, that I look back and go, I don't really know another explanation for that. And Jeffrey's one of those, because we did a couple of shows with Boy Howdy, but we didn't spend a lot of time together. We didn't become really close friends. But I remember one time going to the wave pool years ago over there by Opryland, and Jeffrey was there with his wife, and this was the mullet days. We happened to recognize each other. We both had the mullets, and and he came up and he approached me, said, man, Western Flyer. He goes, dude, I love your sound. I love your voice, and I love what you guys do and your harmonies. And I'm like, dude, I mean, we haven't had hit songs like Boy Howdy and, whatever. And, but it was just sort of this mutual respect thing. And, and you play bass too. And honestly, man, like, we swapped numbers, but we didn't talk. I mean, literally, it was at least 4 or 5 years later, and just seeing him out of the blue. And it just was one of those things that, he happened to listen to our records and he bought them at the time. I was the same way with him, but you're exactly right. I mean, every no matter what kind of business you're in, I always look at it. Relationships are everything, like you said. And I'll have young people that are moving to town, want to be a studio musician, whatever. And believe me, I have my moments now that it has really become a business of these sort of cliques and these crews that people are in, right? And Luke Combs has his group of people, and FGL has their group of people. Jason Aldean, I cracked that thing at one time, but he's got his group of people, and it's really hard to get into, and that's really frustrating from the outside. But at the same time, I find myself going, look, if I'm going to cut a record, I know who my first call is for guitar, for drums, for bass. Those are the guys I want. They make the record sound the way I want them to sound. And I understand going back to the well, and I also understand if I can find an artist that I love and I'm his producer and we work together and we suddenly have success, I want that artist to go, no, man, Danny's my guy.
That's right.
And so
that's right.
At the end of the day, if I'm picking a player on a record, if I'm picking a song to record on somebody or whatever, all things being equal, I'm human like anybody else, and I'm going to side with my friend's song. And so, those relationships have been, that's been the most magical thing about this for me. And I will say, too, on a negative and a positive note, in a business like the music business, you look back down the road and you realize how few of those relationships that in the moment 5, 10, 15 years ago you thought were really close friends, that at the end of the day, man, it's a short list of people that I go back 20 years ago with, that I go, I'm still talking to them frequently. I'm still close to them.
Right.
It's a very volatile business.
So first of all, I think it's so cool, folks, that, all right, so if I gave Danny a pen and a piece of paper, he makes money up here. He sells stuff. Well,
it's so easy. All of you guys that want to be songwriter, Nick just summed it up. It's so easy.
Well, that's part of it. You still got to pitch it. Somebody's got to pick the song, track it, and all those type of things. But it's absolutely phenomenal that literally, like, it's the music business. So there's music first, and then there's a whole business side of it. And it's hard enough just to become good at music,
for sure.
But then you got to master the business side of it too.
For sure.
So one of the questions that I had for you was, and this is, we may need to come back to this one, but I was wanting to ask you, like, so I knew the young Danny. Yeah. I know Danny that sits here today, just like you knew the elementary school version, and now the midlife crisis version. What would you tell you 20 if you could go back and tell yourself something 20 years ago, or when you first got to Nashville? God,
there are two sides of that are so important to me that if I could talk to like 17-year-old me, one, I would say really dive into writing what you know and being really true to your world and your life and your honesty with writing what you know. And the reason that's really important to young me is that I fell in love with, FM radio, 3.5 minute hit songs. I loved commercial radio. But my early writing started getting to a place of going, what is commercial? What would make this a hit? As opposed to just really being as authentically real. So I would definitely go back to myself. And then on the business side, man, if I could go back to 19-year-old me starting at Belmont and really understand the ownership aspect of the business of songwriting, making the assumption that things are going to go the way I want them to go and I'm going to get cuts and I'm going to have hits. If I could really understand the power of ownership and publishing, I would be, I don't even know how to multiply where my net worth would be now.
That's right.
If I had understood the power of ownership. It reminds me a little bit. I've been watching this Winning Time show about the Lakers on HBO.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. But last night's episode was the scene where Magic Johnson, all the shoe companies are pitching him. And Converse had just signed Larry Bird. And, of course, he's got this competitive thing with Larry Bird. But this young guy named Phil Knight from Nike comes in. And they're brand new. He's nobody. And he shows him the shoe. And he goes, man, imagine, I want to put Magic on the side of this shoe.
Yep.
It's all yours and whatever. And so Magic's like, well, how much can you offer me? Because he goes, well, he said, I can't pay what the other guys are. I'm sure Converse is offering like $60,000. He goes, 80. And he goes, well, I can't do that. But what I will do is I'll give you $1 for every shoe we sell and a percentage of stock in the company.
That's incredible.
And Magic goes with Converse. And so he said that one of his biggest regrets in his life as he looks back was that, and it's the power of ownership. And you don't know that when you're young. And
that's right.
So yeah, I wish I'd known that.
Well, that's, first of all, I think just off topic, John C. Reilly is, from a sales guy, like, oh my God, he nailed all those things, all those objections in the beginning and making all those things happen. Like, he was so smooth. I think he just really portrayed that part so well. He
turns everything as Dr. Jerry Buss, because he had to, because he was broke.
Yep.
And he's buying into the Lakers. He sees what the Lakers can be. And this is very young entrepreneurial of like, everyone you're talking to is asking you, but what if this happens? What if this goes wrong? And you have to be the one guy going, yeah, but what if it goes right?
That's right.
You know what I mean? It's like that one, and I think he had that mindset. And yeah, last night's episode is, I won't give anything away because you really should watch it. And it's very R-rated, so be aware of that. But
that's right.
But there's last night was kind of about, the loan gets called in and he does not have the money.
Yep.
And what am I going to do? How am I going to convince these folks to give me, and he was out of options, and he sits down with this super positivity going, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I'm not paying you back anything to the bank, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to own 10% of the Los Angeles Lakers. And we're going to win the championship this year. And one of these days they're going to build a statue of you. And he's just this whole energy, and was broke.
It's so good.
Was broke. And that's kind of, any business you're in, if you're going to work for yourself, you got to figure out a way to be a self-starter, and you just got to be that guy, so hard.
So one of the things that you've talked about is you went from the gospel family background to in school, then you're in a band, right? And by the way, there's a lot of great. I played with some amazing baseball players that just weren't with the right organization.
Sure.
And that's why they didn't get bigger than they did. That was kind of the story for you guys with the record label, right? And that's part of the business.
It's part of the business. I look back now, part of the complication specifically for me, without speaking for the other guys, is I was a big fish in a little pond. And when I came to Belmont, honestly, I was at Belmont about 5 months before I ran out of money. So I didn't spend a lot of time there. But just my time at Belmont was the first time I was suddenly what you might consider, like being in the minor leagues in baseball, where you've been really good in high school, but you've been like the guy on your team. And suddenly you realize, well, everybody here hits the same way you do, and everybody can throw 85 to 95 miles an hour and all that kind of stuff. And so, looking back with Western Flyer, I realize it would have been good for me to see myself more as a student and see that record deal. And matter of fact, because I'm a big baseball fan, I tell young artists who just got signed with Universal or Warner or Sony, when I write with them now, I'm like, okay, welcome to the big leagues. That's awesome that you got here. A lot of people get here.
Yeah.
Most don't stay here.
That's right.
And 90% of you guys, I do it for myself, 90% of the people who sign a major label record deal lose that major label record deal. Very few of them stay. Way fewer of them have long-term success. And I wish that, looking back, I would love to have been a little bit more of a student mindset when it came to songs.
Yeah.
And then you're right. We were the independent label who really believed in us. But when push came to shove and we had an opportunity, without getting into the weeds on it, we had an opportunity to sign a major label deal. And, our label guy wouldn't let us out of our deal.
Yeah.
And ultimately our only option was to
And then he ran out of money.
And he ran out of money.
That's right.
It was to break up and do other things,
Yep.
And so a couple of guys kind of kept the music thing going.
Mm-hmm.
My partner, Chris Marion, he's been with a Little River Band for 20 years now.
That's
and
right.
doing great with them. And anyway, that's... the organization thing is a really, really important point. The reliance on others, the team aspect of all of that,
Yeah.
really important. Like it's next to impossible to think I'm going to be good enough to just write great songs, go make all my demos myself, and go find the artists, go get them cut. I mean, it's essentially impossible to do that.
Bam. That's right. Well, it's so cool. So you mentioned that after you got out of the business and then came back, so you're reinventing yourself yet again.
Yeah.
Right. And then you mentioned, like you said, staying is the hard part, because especially in the arts, man, like there's young people coming right behind you with new, fresh ideas and like staying relevant.
Yeah. It's really, really complicated. I mean, the music business is a new man's game, or a young man's game. And I guess the blessing of where I was at with country music is that I had my deal with Western Flyer. That went for a few years. When that ended, I kind of went back into the Christian music world a little bit, because it's just what I knew. And then, I went through a little bit of a dark time in my life, and a little bit of a fall from grace moment for a few years, and then kind of restarting. The good news is that coming back into country, I guess since I hadn't been in country that last 4 or 5 years, probably ended up being a little bit of a blessing for me, because I didn't have a lot of baggage of lost or failed publishing deals,
Right.
failed record deals. There were still a lot of radio people who loved our band, kind of felt like, man, I think you guys didn't really get a fair shot. I love your voice, or whatever. So I had a few people pulling for me. And then I think I was humbled to come back into the business going, man, I don't have any idea what I'm doing in terms of where it is now. But I very fortunately, with Jeffrey Steele had a guy that was going, trust your instincts, demo everything. And what I mean by that, most companies like, bring your songs to us, we'll go through them, we'll help you decide what to demo. But he saw my potential as a producer. And believe me, the publishing company was kind of going, no, we don't want to spend the money on it. And Jeffrey was going, demo everything.
That's right.
Because everything you get in there and do is going to help you get better. And then I had somebody every morning, even when I wasn't writing with him, I had just the hours of conversations with someone who at the time is, having 4 or 5 hits on the charts at one time consistently, that I was able to go, what makes a song a hit song? And I've got him going, and I've got him explaining, from my perspective, here's some things that I lean on. So that was just kind of a re-education for me.
That's awesome. So, you have lately, the coolest thing that I won't say it's the coolest thing in my opinion. That's cool is the stuff that you're doing with the great Leslie Jordan. It's just, how can you not feel good around that guy?
Man, Leslie's a fascinating story. some of your listeners may either not know him or not know.
Everybody knows.
Well, how this whole thing came about. It's really funny. In a day and age of social media, you had the 65-year-old guy. He's, he was on Will and Grace. He's been in a bunch of TV things, American Horror Story. A lot of people know him from that. I met him through my friend Travis Howard about 5 years ago. Randomly, Leslie had come to Travis. Leslie's background is he's from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yep.
It's about a 4'11", 5 foot tall, super flamboyant gay dude.
Yep.
From East Tennessee.
Yep.
And he talks like that. He's fully East Tennessee. But he, along with that, he had a really complicated relationship with both the South and growing up in a very conservative Baptist church. He was bullied a lot, made fun of, called all kind of names that you can imagine. So he had a really complicated relationship with all that, and he turned all of that into humor. So I met him a few years ago when Travis called me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you know who Leslie Jordan is." He gave me one reference. I'm like, "Yeah, I know exactly who that is." And he said he's written this musical, this play that he wants to be a musical, and he wants the music to be sort of like Southern white choir, sort of Southern gospel, which is what I grew up in. It's what Travis grew up in. And he's like, I know the right guy. He told me, let me call my friend Danny. Musically, we know exactly what to do with this. So we wrote this musical, and we made a couple of live appearances with it, performed it, and it just crushed. And we kind of got away from it because he got some other things going on. But that's a back burner thing right now that we're going to go back to. So that's how I met him. So in the middle of the pandemic, about February of 2020, Leslie was sitting at about 60,000, 70,000 Instagram followers. Between March of 2020 of the lockdown and June of 2020, he went from 70,000 to 5 million. He was the fastest in Instagram history to 5 million, just ahead of J-Lo.
It's so funny.
And ultimately, you guys know, if you follow him on Instagram, basically what was happening is in the middle of the world, we're all going, what are we even doing with ourselves? And
hunker down.
And so what he started doing, he would grab his phone, and every morning, first thing in the morning, hello, my fellow hunker downers, and he would say what most of us are thinking, and it was, well, shit, what are y'all doing? And it was just all of that. And he would say stuff that was super irreverent. He would, saying all the stuff we're thinking. And and then a few months into that, he started going over to Travis's house. They both live in LA, and they started every Sunday morning. He would do what he called Sunday hymn singing. And he would kind of tell stories, and Travis would play guitar, and he would sing like "I'll Fly Away" or "When We All Get to Heaven," these old songs. So we started having a conversation about, man, maybe why don't you make a record? You've gotten so many followers, and when he sings, it's kind of like, little Jimmy Dickens meets, he's not as good a singer as Andy Griffith, but there's this kind of thing that he does, that's kind of homespun. So he comes to town. I got an opportunity. CMT wanted him to come host the CMT Top 20 Countdown in the middle of COVID, and they wanted him to sing on the show. And he goes, he said, you know what, I'll do it if my friend Danny can come play guitar with me.
How cool is that?
So speaking of relationships, I'm like, that's awesome. So CMT calls me. We're trying to figure out how to do this. We're in the middle of COVID protocols.
Yep.
Pre-vaccine, all the things. Nobody can be in the same room together. And I reached out to a buddy of mine named Sean Silva, who owns a company called Tackle Box Films. If you grew up on CMT, all of Jason Aldean's videos, Luke Bryan's videos, Carrie Underwood, you see Sean Silva's name at the end of them. He directs all those videos. So he's got this company, and I happen to remember that at his facilities, the most random thing with COVID, but he's got his conference room is a suspended glass conference room in the middle of their place with a small opening to walk through. So I reached out to Sean. I said, man, would it be possible for us to do a COVID-friendly, like the artist all test? Everybody wears masks, but we can go in and do this thing. Cameras on the outside of the glass. And he goes, man, I think we could maybe do that.
Yeah.
So I called Leslie and I said, hey, as long as you're going to be in town, why don't we do like a live stream songwriter show that me and another songwriter can play songs and you tell stories. So Travis came with him from LA and we did this hit songwriter thing in the Glass House. We're out at dinner at the Capitol Grill at Hermitage Cafe. Nobody else is in there because, again, it's COVID. They're barely open. And we're sitting there and he starts singing Delta Dawn. So his partner, Mike Lotus, videos that. They put it on Instagram. About midnight that night, Tanya Tucker jumps into his DMs and goes, "Oh my God, I love you. You're just this little ray of sunshine I see every day. And by the way, I just love to hear you sing my song. And if you ever decided you wanted to make a record, I would love to sing on it with you."
Get out.
So we're in the middle of talking about doing this gospel record, and he says, "Should I ask Tanya?" We're like, "Of course, ask Tanya." So he reaches out to Tanya and says, "Will you sing on my record?" So he calls us a few days later, and he goes, "Well, y'all aren't going to believe this, but Tanya said I would love to sing on the record I'm in. By the way, I don't know if you know my producer, Brandy Carlisle. She loves you. I
Oh
bet
my
she'd sing
gosh.
on it too." So we get Brandy and Tanya, and he says, should we ask anybody else? We're like, hell yes, ask everybody,
That's
because
right.
everybody's telling you yes. So about 2 weeks later, he calls us, and he goes, well, so Chris Stapleton and his wife, Morgan, said yes, they would do it, and Dolly Parton said she would sing on it. He just gives us these list of names. We're like, are you kidding me? So we decided to go in and record this record, and I was a big fan of the Brothers Osborne. I reached out to TJ Osborne, who had not come out yet, but was, most people around him kind of knew the struggle he was having with that. And I said, man, I would love for you to sing on this record as TJ, not with your brother, just do your thing. And he loved Leslie, so he did it. And then we get toward the end of the record, and Leslie's friend Mike calls me, and he goes, "Hey, I have become good friends with Eddie Vedder, and I think there's a chance we could get Eddie on the record."
Unbelievable.
And this is a gospel record, right?
That's right.
So I'm going...
With Leslie Jordan.
With Leslie Jordan. And I'm going like, well, okay. All these other people had some relationship with gospel music. They knew these songs. Eddie Vedder is, he's an agnostic. He didn't grow up he grew up in Seattle. It has no relationship, doesn't know anything about these songs. So we're trying to be true to Leslie too. And I'm going, as much as I would love to have Eddie Vedder on this record, I don't know what song he could sing. So Travis and I started diving into this sort of post-Pearl Jam Eddie Vedder world, where if any of your fans are Eddie Vedder fans, he lives in Hawaii. He's become this sort of like super healthy, sort of new agey guy who's into Celtic music, and he plays ukulele all the time. So as any songwriter would do, I start getting up every morning and making a pot of coffee, grabbing my ukulele, and just playing, whatever, just trying to figure out, man, and what can I say in it? But we're in the middle of COVID, right? And so I had, my dad passed away on the same day we lost John Prine. Everybody in the world is processing this. And I'm like, man, even if you're not necessarily identifying as a Christian, everybody's dealing with these existential things, right? With life.
Right.
So I had this song idea hit me one morning, and I wrote it in about 20 minutes, and I sent it to Travis, and he had some ideas to change the second verse. So we did, and we demoed it up like the stuff we were hearing Eddie do on all this Celtic weird stuff. So we just, and his voice is really ratty and raw, right? So I would get up in the morning, and before I even drank a glass of water, I would go in and try to record a verse vocal, just just rough as it could be. So we sent it to him on a Friday night, and Meg, my wife, and I are sitting there watching Netflix, and I get this text message from Mike, and it's from Jill Vedder, Eddie's wife. And it's a screenshot of her message, and it says, "Hey, Eddie is in the studio laying on his back playing ukulele and learning your song."
Get out.
And so...
Come on.
Yeah, so that's kind of just like, wait, hold on a second. This is,
Come on.
at this point, super surreal. And again, one of those things you could never imagine happening. And about 2 weeks later, he asked for our session, our demo session, and he kind of messed with him. About 2 weeks later, he sent us the master of his version of this song with Leslie on it. And so yeah, Eddie cut a song that I wrote.
Dude, if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's yeah. What's the thing? You don't get 100% of the things you don't ask for. Is that
That's
the thing?
right. Yeah, Michael Jordan used to say, or Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100%.
You miss 100%
of
shots you don't take.
That's
it.
right.
That's exactly right.
Well, that's so cool. Again, just relationships, but like the relationships that led to all that happening was decades in the works, and that's
yes. And so my friendship regarding that was with a guy named Travis Howard, and Travis and I met through my friend Aaron Benward, who was best man at my wedding. I've known Aaron for a long time. Travis and I became friends. We grew up in the same world of gospel music. Travis was on Nashville Star with Miranda Lambert. They kind of became an item and wrote a bunch of songs together.
That's right.
Coming out of that, he wrote Famous in a Small Town, Heart Like Mine with her. And then he moved to L.A., but his move to L.A., then he met Leslie really early moving to L.A. They've known each other for 20 years. And so, yeah, the way these things come together, you know, I tell younger people these days, man, like every decision, the importance and the power of the decisions that you make right now in terms of your business and your relationships, man, you're 21, like what you're doing right now is what's going to be where you're at 25. What you're doing at 20, and how fast, you know, how fast 18 becomes 25, becomes 35, becomes 50.
Yes.
Is crazy.
Yes.
And there's just not a lot of time to waste. And there's balance in that for sure. And I'm a real believer in work hard, play hard. But the balance of all of it, finding that early is really, really important.
Well, it's you mentioned like your decisions. Like somebody once told me that like we grew up with grades that was based on our performance, and somebody there's a lot of truth to this, and some people could argue it just as true. But like, so if you look at your bank account or your net worth, that's your report card on life. Mm-hmm. Okay, now it's not contributing to or considering happiness and relate certain things, but like, all these things that you did, it's so hard to get through. I mean, you reinvented yourself 3-4 times throughout this journey, from gospel singer to in a band to songwriting to coming back into it as more of a songwriter or anything, then more production side of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's a 100% a marathon.
It is a marathon. It's really complicated.
How many times did you get knocked down?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I'm a middle child, which can make me a little sensitive to things, and I'm a real. We talked about this a little bit with politics, without getting into politics. I'm like, I'm a middle child. I'm a centrist. I'm more of a moderate with all things. I try to find, the sides of both sides, the things that can bring things together. I'm just kind of wired that way. And I'm a slow learner, man. I learned the hard way. And I kind of, tended to be somebody that I grew up in a super conservative Christian world where there's a lot of fear-based, a lot of shame-based teaching. My view of God was very, angry old man on the throne looking for me to mess up so he could pop me with a rod or curse me with some whatever. And so that made it,
which is opposite of what it is.
It's opposite of what it is. But
That's right.
And as a result, that made me really cautious in terms of experimentation with much of anything. But really part of the reason that I wanted to move into country music is that with gospel music, I felt like there kind of had to be a bow on everything, which true. I appreciate. God is awesome. We're going to heaven. Songs about God and songs about heaven. That's for sure. But getting outside that was a little tougher. And then in country music, I'm writing about all these things that I really hadn't lived. With Western Flyer, we were really cautious about songs that talked about alcohol. Yeah, we were all teetotalers for the most part. We didn't drink. We didn't have beer on the bus. Mm-hmm. But man, there's some great songs about drinking. I was going like, man, I got drunk for the first time, I don't know, probably early 30s.
Okay.
And so like all this stuff, and so I learned the hard way, man. I mean, the music business is really complicated. I lost a marriage through it, and
all businesses
for sure they
complicated. Absolutely,
for sure.
And that's what I'm trying to. The point where I'm trying to get to folks is like they're all hard.
But honestly, it really is. It's all in the getting back up. It's all in the getting back up, and it's all in letting go. We were talking about earlier. The ability to have a short memory, and that's on both sides. That's like, how many times have we seen, I think frequently of like watching the NBA playoffs, where especially in the 80s growing up, where I had those Magic and Larry Bird games. It was one of those series I remember, the Boston Massacre thing, the Valentine, I can't remember what they called it, the Boston Massacre. But basically the first game of the Lakers series, the Celtics won it by like 42 points.
Yeah.
Then the next game, the Lakers came back and won. And so the whole point is, like, if you're Larry Bird, if you're the winner in that situation, don't buy into all your press on how great you are.
That's right.
And then if you lost yesterday, you can't buy into all the press on just what a loser you are. Because you got to come back the next day. It's why I love baseball.
That's
because
right.
because baseball to me is such an indicative. It is the perfect equivalent if you're looking for a sport that mirrors life, because there are some things you can really go out and show off on your own. You can you can make an unbelievable catch. You can hit the winning home run. That's just you. You didn't need a whole team to do that. But then you're part of a team that you have to like connect with other people to make this happen. You can strike out to end an inning, and then you have to be aware standing out in right field when it's really slow. One ball comes to you that could mean everything.
That's right. And
then you make that error and you go back in and you're batting. And it's like forgetting what happened last inning and coming back and the opportunity to do that. Yeah, you're right. Every business is that. The music business.
Some are harder than others.
The entertainment business is more complicated than others because it's very youth-oriented. It's hard to find revenue. And so it's just hard to keep going.
Come on.
When Western Flyer did our first radio tour, and this is another one of the stories that I convey to young artists, I'll never forget going to this radio station in Orlando. It was an afternoon thing. We go by at drive time. We go on the air. We play our song, and we have a show that night at this bar. And I remember sound check at this bar, and I'm walking around, and I'm seeing all these album covers, because we're on our radio tour, right? And so it's all these people that are coming out same time as we are. James Bonham just had a #1 song. Brian White's out there. Shania from a couple of years ago. All these records are all over the wall. And I'll never forget about a year later going back and playing that place.
Mm-hmm.
And walking around the room going, he's gone, she's gone.
Oh, wow.
They moved back. That band broke up.
Wow.
Blah, 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 blah. And just feeling like, man, we're one of the few left. And just, the intensity and the stick-to-itiveness.
That's incredible.
Tough.
So, two things that, one, you got something going on, a venture going on out in Cali.
Yeah, man. I'm a big fan. I mentioned earlier, just in passing, my upbringing was kind of gospel music only, with a little bit of country. Mm-hmm. And the thing that could kind of, the gospel only was really because of content, right? No cheating songs, no drinking songs, all the stuff. But the things that could kind of break through there was like harmony bands. Yep. So, Alabama, we listened to a little bit of country music. But when the Eagles came out, and it was Peaceful, Easy Feeling and Take It Easy and Lion Eyes, those songs felt pretty safe. So we'd listen to those on road trips, whatever, and me and my brothers would learn vocals from that. So I really fell in love with Laurel Canyon country and Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt, and the Flying Burrito Brothers and America. There's that sound, those harmonies that felt Western, kind of West Coast. And then I love the Bakersfield sound. I love Buck Owens and Merle Haggard and, Buck and Don Rich, the sound they had. And then later, Dwight Yoakam and all that. So about a year and a half ago, I've been going out and writing in L.A. for a long time. And I just started realizing that, man, like all of these people from the West Coast, thinking about Gary Allen and thinking about John Pardee and Brett Young and Devin Dawson, all these country artists, they have to come to Nashville, which is fine. This is where the country music business is. But one of the dangers of that is that Nashville sort of has this machine going that Nashvilleizes everything, right? Mm-hmm. And there's kind of a wildness to California country that Nashville doesn't have. So I just feel like we've been missing that. So I talked to my producer or my publisher about, man, what if I kind of had some feet on the ground in L.A. and I started looking for some up-and-coming California country artists that rather than them coming here, I'll get on board with it out there, write some songs with them, produce some things, and when it's ready to go to Nashville, I'll bring it here.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's kind of the thing, and it gives me an excuse to be out there.
That's what I was going to say is like, dude, did you ever think that you'd be able to like say, I'm going to work in California for a while?
I kind of dreamed about it. And man, the thing that's a blessing, this sounds so bougie and it's really not. It's super simple, but our place is in Malibu.
That's awesome.
And one of my favorite spots out there to go watch sunset is a place called Duke's Malibu. And the apartment that we have, it's got a studio downstairs and all. It's 5 minutes walk down to Duke's.
Oh, wow.
And so I love it. And so my son lives out there. He's an actor and he's been out there a while. And so I get to see him frequently. And
how cool is that? Well, that was my next thing is I was wanting to lead into your family because your wife is a superstar in her own right.
Yeah, she's great. She's my wife, Megan Linville, if you look her up on all the socials and stuff. So Meg, she grew up singing. Her grandfather was a songwriter, Jerry McBee. He had he had cuts on like Charlie Pride and Roy Orbison, like these great oldies. But she grew up in that world, and her first record she made coming straight out of high school was with John Carter Cash, Johnny Cash's son.
Wow.
Recorded at the cabin up there. And so she and I met through songwriting, and she'd come out of a relationship. I was going through a divorce, and she's younger than me, and I was kind of like, this will be fun for a while. I never expected it to be anything serious, but she's an old soul, and I fell in love with her family, and we got married almost 5 years ago. So yeah, she does her thing. We made a record on her a couple of years ago, and then she just recently, probably her biggest claim to fame recently is she's become the voice of Bluebell ice cream.
That's right.
So if you hear that Bluebell ice cream commercial, that's her doing that. So
How
she's
cool.
royalty in Texas.
That's right.
And then I've got 2 boys, and man, my boys are awesome. They played baseball growing up. Matter of fact, a real turning point in Braden, my younger son's life, is he ended up going to see Mickey, going to see your dad, and doing hitting lessons the summer between his sophomore and junior year. And it was an interesting time for him because he fell in love with theater during this time, right? He
Yep.
fell in love with acting. And he came back to school, and Hillsborough High School had changed baseball coaches, so the new guy didn't know him.
Yep.
And he was a 2-year starter already from freshman and sophomore years, which is great in high school. But his coach said, "I'm sorry, man. I don't know you. You're going to have to earn your position." And all the other, So anyway, you know the deal.
Yeah.
And so, and honestly, understandable. But he wanted to do the school play in the spring, but it kept him out of preseason practices. But anyway, he had worked with your dad on hitting, kind of got that down. And he came back to school, and the coach pinch hit him the first 2 games. And he went 1 for 1 in both of those games. He started game 3 and went 3 for 3. Long story short, he started the season 18 for 18.
There you go.
And
That's incredible.
and he batted .631.
Wow.
His junior year.
That might be a school record. I went to the same school. That's where I went to school.
Oh, no kidding.
I sure did.
I wonder what the school record is. 'Cause
Dude.
he led the state in batting his junior year, average.
Yeah, to have, so it's a minimum required at bats, which he obviously had.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of guys that don't get 18 hits in the whole season, and he got 18 in his
In a
first.
row.
Yeah, and that's like, that's probably like what, 3 at bats per game.
That's a game.
Yeah, so
and
it's
he well, you can appreciate this. He batted second, and played 30 whatever varsity games, and he struck out 3 times.
Wow,
all
that's
year
great.
long. But a lot of that was from your dad. But we grew up fans of baseball. My boys are both really, really creative. My older son finished up school at UT Chattanooga with an English degree, and he started a band here in town, and for about 5 years he did that thing with a rock band, sort of like an early 70s riff rock, Black Sabbath meets Led Zeppelin kind of band, and then decided he wanted to go to do something a little bit more settled, and he went back to school, and he's studying architecture. And then Braden, like I said, fell in love with theater, and he lives in LA, and he's had a few things. He shot a couple of indie films. Right before the COVID lockdown, he was on an episode of FBI's Most Wanted.
That's awesome.
That replayed a bunch of times, and he and some friends put on a play that we went to see a couple of weeks ago. Again, that made that easy because we're in LA a good bit at the time. So, so yeah, man, I've been really, really fortunate. I know you can appreciate this with Ethan, but in losing a marriage and going through a divorce like I went through, all the stuff looking back, there's so many ups and downs. But man, when you look at your kids, and when people, you have coaches that'll come to you and go, man, if I could have 10 of him.
That's right.
And the coolest thing with the ages my boys are now as adults, man, I've had a couple of their friends individually come to me and go, a real anchor moment in my life was meeting your son and what he's been to me. And those are the things where you feel like, all the stuff's good, but if nothing else ever happens, that's really, really awesome.
That's right. Well, and it's, obviously the ups and downs of baseball has probably made him be able to withstand. Like, part of just making it is just being able to take all the knocks and keep getting back up because there's less and less people. They all fall off,
sure.
and they quit. So he's still rocking and rolling. There's no doubt he's going to make it.
Hey, man, and God, the universe, however you want to see it,
that's right,
uses those things. There's a couple of things that come to play, talking about his junior season. One is there is a camp that he goes to, that he went to every year from 11 years old on, that once you turn 16, it's an 8-week camp in Minnesota at the border, at the boundary waters up there at Canada. And he fell in love with it. It's a wilderness camp, and it's all guys, no cell phones, no iPods, no anything back in the day. But playing baseball, it becomes year round, and so he would skip some travel ball for 4 weeks and go do it. But once you turn 16, you have to go the whole summer. But part of that summer is you have this 21-night hike up to see the northern lights. It's a really incredible thing. So what coincided with the batting lessons with your dad that summer is he decided he fell in love with theater, and he decided, I'm not going to play college baseball. I'm not even going for it.
Yep.
So that took all of that weight. You know how that is in high school. It was scouts. So he quit worrying about that. I'm going to play baseball to have fun because I love theater. And then honestly, because of the situation with his coach, it pissed him off of going, what do you, like, I've got, 60 games of the last 2 seasons under my belt, and you're not going to start me.
You ain't even going to look at stats or
Not
nothing.
even going to look at stats. He's like, screw that guy. And so he had this chip on his shoulders that he would not have had because the coach made him earn it.
Good for him.
So
good for him.
Which he better have if he's going to be an actor.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, it's funny too. Fiona's off camera over here, but Fiona, the beautiful thing about my son is that he's way more. I'm a little bit of an introvert, right? So he's not. He's like his mom. This is a few years ago. So he's 12 now. He's younger, and he used to borrow our phones to play games or whatever else, and he figured out how to call people, and he blew you up.
He did. Like, call me anytime, man. I love it. I would have done this. I was so precocious as a kid. I would have done that all day long. Wouldn't matter who it was.
Ethan used to call Danny all the time from our phones too.
I'm glad it was me. It could have been. I mean, who knows?
That's right.
Funny.
That's right. Well, I do want to get your amazing bride in here as well. To talk about all the stuff that she's got going on as well, just because you guys are doing a lot of things together. You're traveling together, performing together.
Yeah, we've been really, really fortunate. She's a singer, and our worlds really are separate. I'm way more in the business and the music road thing than she is. And she's, country music has changed a bunch, and she's a little bit more, she grew up on 80s and 90s country and really loves, she loved old Faith Hill and Patty Loveless and stuff like that. That's not really where country radio is.
Right.
So she doesn't do that, but she's not quite as out there in the Americana world as like Margot Price or whatever. So she's figuring her thing out. And I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything. But I've had a couple situations over the last few years. I'd be out playing somewhere, and she would be there and get up and play a song, and then suddenly everybody forgets I'm there. Yeah. Because they love her voice. And so we've been really, really fortunate that, probably 80% of the things I play, we get to play together. Mm-hmm. And so most of our traveling is together, and she's got her own writing. Some of it we do together, and then some of it's separate. And but yeah, it's been really, I'm so grateful to get to do that. So.
Absolutely. And she's a beautiful.
Yeah, she's not hard to look at.
Oh my goodness.
I'm married up for sure.
Well, that's how, like I said, we knew you could sell. I'm looking at
I pay her well. Absolutely. Talking her into the number one, marrying a songwriter, that up and down world. And
that's
number two with me.
That's what I'm saying.
I must be brilliant. I need to rethink my whole thing.
So, dude, you've had a ton of big hits that everybody would know. She's Country by Jason Aldean. The story behind Tim McGraw's Truck Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit before we started. That's pretty cool.
Well, there's multiple things to Truck Yeah that are pretty funny. One is the day we wrote the song, I'd had a conversation with a producer who will remain nameless. That's a buddy of mine, but in the music business, like every few weeks we get what's called a tip sheet. And the tip sheet basically will give us the list. It's almost like a call sheet for cold calling if you're in sales, where suddenly there's a difference in like full-on cold calls, and then suddenly you get some leads that are a little close. There's been a death in the family, but something, that are a little bit more specific. So the hit sheet, the tip sheet would tell us who's recording over the next few weeks and some little bit of what they're looking for. Now, I used to joke that it's so ridiculous of like, it'll say like, Keith Urban looking for positive up-tempo summer radio smash. And we're like, who knew, right? Duh. But sometimes it will say something specific. But anyway, this morning I had a co-write with Chris Jansen that he called me and said, man, I've accidentally double booked and I've got LoCash today. So I said, well, let's just all four write. So on the way to the right, before I left, I looked at my email and I saw this tip sheet. I saw this one artist that was recording. And the next couple of weeks, and so I called his producer on the way in. I said, "Hey, curious what you might be looking for." So he goes, "Well, man, we're just we're this country record looking for great country songs." And again, I'm like, "Who knew?" And I said, "Well, maybe you can help me know kind of not like what not to look for, right? Like, sometimes they'll go in and an artist like Keith Urban, they might go, okay, we're cutting 2 love ballads on this record and we won't do any more. And if we've already cut those 2 songs and we love those, they'll tell you." Kenny Chesney frequently you see on the tip sheet, "Don't send beach songs."
Right.
I got plenty of beach songs. So I asked him, "Do you have, something you don't need any more of?" He goes, "Well, we don't really need any more of like how country your country is, or like, back road country, dirt road, trucks, jeans, mamas, prison." Like it goes down the whole list, and I always tell a bit about it when I'm playing it live. And so I said, "Well, I get that, but I do have to say that, when I go home to Mississippi for Thanksgiving and, my cousins are coming out of the woods and they're in jacked up trucks and they're wearing camo coveralls and they've got Bocephus stickers on their trucks. They love these songs that go, 'Hey, I'm country. I don't care what you think about it.'" He's like, "We don't need that." So I go into the co-write, and it's Chris, and Chris is wearing camo coveralls. He's been in the woods all morning, and the LoCash guys are there, and I tell them this story. And so Jansen goes, "Screw that, man. Let's write a song." It's like, "Hell yeah, I'm country. I don't care what you think about it," right? And then one of the guys with LoCash, Chris Lucas, goes, "Man, screw that guy. How about F yeah, I'm country?" I'm going, "Well, they're not going to play that on the radio." And so Preston with LoCash goes, "Well, how about Truck yeah, I'm country?" And so it really hit me super hokey, and I'm kind of like, I'm not writing a song called Truck yeah. And so, but we started writing this song called Truck yeah. And so one funny story about that day is we're on the 3rd floor of Sony Publishing, and this song is just like this stomp kind of kind of thing. And so we're all stomping whatever, and somebody knocks on the door and say, "Hey, they're tracking vocals downstairs and they can hear you stomping 2 floors down."
Yeah.
And so we're like, we tell them when we get number 1 money on this song, they won't worry about, whatever. But anyway, so that's the first thing that happened. The second thing that was really interesting is Tim McGraw decided he wanted to do it, which we thought was really, really odd because it's not really a Tim McGraw kind of song.
That's right.
And Tim McGraw is known for, you better bring your best songs. He's a great song chooser.
Yes,
and I'm like,
is.
so I'm like, "But Truck yeah, man," like, because we wrote it kind of hokey redneck, but he did that. And then he was coming out of a record deal with Curb Records, and there was a big lawsuit. Some of your listeners might remember, where he was asking out of his deal, and Curb was like, "You can't leave," and they sued him to stay there. In the middle of the suit, he signs with Scott Borchetta at Big Machine Records, who was really kind of on fire, and Scott Borchetta is one of those guys who kind of like, "I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't care what anybody thinks about it." So in the middle of Tim having a single out on Curb Records, Scott's like, "Screw that," and he puts Truck yeah out. So it becomes a big hit. The funny thing as writers, it's really funny, because of this lawsuit, they didn't want anybody to know what songs they were recording and didn't want even any publishers to get an idea of what style of songs. So we had to, I've never had to do this before, but we had to sign an affidavit that we would not play the song out, would not say Tim McGraw's cutting this song, like you do at rounds, right? Playing a songwriter round. Here's a new song I wrote, McGraw's doing. We couldn't say that. And he said, "If you do, we'll take it off the record." And then we ended up, became a big hit. We got a Ford truck commercial out of it. Whole deal. It's fun.
Incredible. Yeah. That's awesome. And you've played just about everywhere, including, the show Nashville that was on. They kind of really, at the Bluebird, they really kind of put that on it was already a big deal, but like if you didn't know, you didn't know, and now everybody knows. Yeah. And you've played everywhere, including that spot. We actually came. You were cool enough to let us come join you one night when Ethan was younger to come. And you had, I guess, Blasey was with you that night too. Me, yeah. I mean, that was a freaking star-studded lineup that night. It was
great. The Bluebird. I mean, hey, the TV show changed. I mean, it was always kind of wait in line to get in there. You have to make your reservations early in the week, but once it was on the Nashville show, like it's just impossible. I know in the songwriting community, we would, if we had family coming in, we would typically, if we weren't playing, we would take a look at who's playing. So if we have a really close friend and say, "Hey man, is there any chance that you can, put my mother-in-law on the list, But yeah, man, I've been, the first time I went to the Bluebird, I was probably 21, and Jim Photoglow was playing. Russell Smith from the Amazing Rhythm Aces wrote Third Rate Romance. I just remember sitting there going, "Man, I hope I reach a place in my career that I could be I could have enough songs to play this place. And
cool.
talk about lessons learned. The first time I played it was when Jeffrey Steele signed me to a pub deal, and he and Bob DiPiero and Anthony Smith were playing it, and they were all on fire at that point. I had no hits, and I was the fourth guy in the round, and I've never had my ass handed to me like that. I've never been so overmatched.
Yeah.
And just a lesson in everything you've done.
That's right.
And after it, I told Jeffrey, I'm like, dude, I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. And he said, yeah. He said, I remember I played Crested Butte, Colorado one year for an event, and I played with J.D. Souther. And I had a bunch of hits, and I was feeling pretty damn good about myself. And I played Hell Yeah or Cowboy and Me, whatever I played. And he broke into New Kid in Town. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. You know? So kind of what I'm getting from your story is that you came here with big dreams, right? And then it took decades of learning the business, so now you had the knowledge and the tools to actually now start to make those dreams actually become fruition. For sure. Right? With the knowledge you gained over, like, literally decades. For sure. And I think that, man, I've been one of of a small percentage that has been able to figure out a way to have like a middle class living in the music business. It's typically sort of feast or famine. You know, I mentioned earlier, if I had made some decisions different, if I had known some things at a younger age that I know now in terms of the business, I would have been worth a lot more money.
Yep.
But all those circumstances fall how they fall. You know, I found myself in the business trying to hustle. I had young kids. And so my alternative is I could go work at a bar. I could work at UPS. I could try to write songs on the weekends or play with a band on the weekends. Or I could take a cheap pub deal that keeps me in the business and then also play bass on sessions, sing demos, sing harmonies on records. And I did all of the above. And
yeah, we didn't mention that. How many sessions you sang as for demos and backgrounds and everything else. I mean, it was like
I survived on it. And man, one of my favorite stories about all that I had before I ran back into Jeffrey Steele, when I was trying to figure out getting back into the business, I was so broke, man. My kids were, you know, Braden was a baby. Caleb was playing Little League baseball. Excuse me. And I remember being at a baseball game one night, and I'm just trying to figure out, again, you know, I'm not making moves. I'm at this point going, man, I got to buy groceries. I've just got to provide. I got 2 young kids. What am I going to do? And I don't want to lose the stream. And I went to one of the dads on the team off to the side to not embarrass myself, and said, look, man, nobody knows this, but if you have any work for me, any I can do, it doesn't matter what it is. And he goes, well, man, I'm getting ready to put a new bathroom in my office, and so I need somebody to knock down the walls of the old one. I'll give you $15 an hour if you can come tomorrow. I'm like, I'm there. So I'm there doing that, feeling completely humiliated because this is post-record deal, post-pub deal, all this stuff. But feeling also, just to reiterate to your listeners too, when it comes to this hustle, I wasn't filing unemployment. I didn't file bankruptcy. I was nose to the grind. I was going, man, I've got kids. I've got to go do this. And so there was something in that decision to go humble myself and work that I do think triggers something in the universe when you make those decisions to do what you have to do. Yeah. So I'm sitting there, I'm covered in drywall dust and all the stuff. I'm, you know, really frustrated. And my cell phone rings and I answer it, and it's a guy named Bobby Braddock. And so Bobby wrote He Stopped Loving Her Today. Bobby produced the first 3 or 4 Blake Shelton records. I didn't know him at all, but through another friend, a guy who engineered the Western Flyer records, I got to know his wife, who was a songwriter that co-wrote Austin for Blake Shelton. And she had told Bobby had a singer that got another project and couldn't sing next week. He goes, I heard you're a really good harmony singer in the studio. Can I book you next week? Wow. It's 3 days at full scale. Yeah. You know, which meant at that time about $800 a day working all day, and I'm covered in dust and going, you know what? And so that just was like a little spark to go. Right. It's almost like God saying, okay, I see you're there. I know you're doing what you have to do. And, you know, so little by little that happened. And I'll still never forget, man, monumentally, little by little, the things that I learned, the people that I learned from, I quit my last regular job November 13th, 1993.
That's awesome.
When we signed our record deal.
Yep.
And since that time, about 98% of all my income has come from something to do with music.
That's fantastic.
And but I think, sorry I rabbit chased, but to get back to what you were asking me about is, the importance of new relationships, the importance of staying hungry and teachable and knowing that things change. Man, the business that you're in, if somebody who's 20 years older than you suddenly going, oh, I ain't got time for all that newfangled technology.
That's right.
Man, you are costing your life. I mean,
That's right.
One of the most important things to me in my business that nobody even thinks about is I share an Apple Music account with Braden, my 25-year-old. Mm-hmm. So I listen every now and then to all the stuff he has.
So smart.
So, and he's really big into hip hop and like different indie pop stuff that I get on board with things that are winning Grammys now. I've been listening to that artist for 5 years.
That's right.
So typically I'm the 50-something-year-old guy, but I'm in a room with 25-year-olds that I promise I typically know more current music than they do.
Right.
And but I have friends who are out of the business that are my age that bitch and moan about it ain't what it used to be.
They stop learning.
Stop learning.
Yeah.
And so you never stop learning. And, starting over when you have to start over. Again, it's just a small percentage of people. It's great to look at the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and the Elon Musk. That's a small percentage of people.
Absolutely.
But, man, when you can really admire the person who kind of built its whole life doing something that he loves, that really means he never works a day in his life. And,
that's right.
And you get perspective. I think that's probably the biggest thing I've gotten. I'm still hungry and I still want to make a lot of money. I'm not done writing hit songs. I believe that. But even for all the things that it has cost me, if you had told me at 16 that at 57 I would still be doing this full time and making my living at music and didn't fill in the blanks, I would have said I'll take it.
That's right. Well, so I was, at before we got into so I went from playing baseball and signing autographs in front of tens of thousands of people, televised a lot of the time, flying everywhere. I'm somebody. Wasn't paid like somebody, but I'm somebody.
Yeah.
At least I feel like I'm somebody.
And you thought you were on a trajectory.
That's right.
For what you thought was
right.
one thing.
That's right. And one day I finally realized that the organization did not have the same perception of me as I did about myself. And I realized that my playing time and my pay wasn't going to match what I thought, wasn't going to match what they thought. So that was when we got into the nightclub and restaurant business, where we had a great little run. But like after that, I was literally taking out trash and dragging baseball fields while I figured out what in the heck I was gonna do next.
Yeah, man.
And it took me having the girl at home I couldn't afford to marry, and the young boy, and I felt like such a total loss and failure, and I got mad at myself. It took me probably from 30 to 35. I wasn't the greatest person.
Sure.
But I was going through the process of figuring out who the heck I was, past all that other stuff and all the being jaded and the bruises and all the knocks that come along with all that failure, to get to like a lot of people, we have the greatest listeners ever, Danny. Oh my gosh. And when they come to, they get the inspiration from people like you, and they want to keep moving forward. It's just like, guys, like I'll look 5 years from now and be like, I was nobody 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I'm just getting started. Just getting started. I had this talk with my son last night where my job is if he tells me, Dad, I know this is what I want to do, I'm 100%, then my job is to make sure that, one, he has everything that he needs to do that, and then that he earns, like, that's the thing, is like he has a lot of the nicest stuff ever.
Sure.
But he earns it because he uses it and he works hard. And I told him, I was like, the hardest part for me is I want to be along with you along that ride the whole time. But I was like, I'm still doing it for myself too.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the hardest part about being a parent for me, is I'm still chasing, I want to conquer the world too.
I got to tell you, man, on those lines though, I've had, I went through the divorce, went through all that. My boy's mom passed away in 2018. She had beaten breast cancer and then it came back. And so there's just so many things that go on with that. And we've had these, I've had, my relationship with my boys is different now.
Yeah.
And, going through a divorce, it puts you in a place of like, okay, there's no more glossing over everything. So it's this real,
It's raw, right?
painfully raw and real thing, which really it should be all the time.
That's right.
Not necessarily raw as much as just honest. But what it did for me, I suddenly have this really honest relationship with my boys. And, a couple of primary things that thing with Ethan reminds me of is, my older son told me a couple of years ago, and we're sitting there drinking whiskey and having
That's
a deep
so cool.
conversation
I
about
can't
life.
wait.
It's the most awesome thing. But he said, all those times that you were, trying to give some life lesson or telling something you thought was so important that you're like, they're not hearing a word. He said, we were listening. We heard it.
Wow.
And so, that is because we've all been there. And once you get into high school years, that's when at times you just think, they're tuned out. But he said, man, we always heard and we always saw. And then, last night, I was having this conversation with Braden, my younger son, because we were just, he's doing the same up and down kind of ride through the acting business. And we were talking about relational stuff, and we had kind of had a differing of opinion on stuff. And so the conversation had been a little heated at times. And I was talking about, how I might have a position with failed relationships on my part where I might speak through that filter. And maybe when I'm talking to him, I might be talking to myself, or I might be, because I'm hard on myself about that, maybe going to a certain bent. And he said, well, I want you to know though, he said, I know that you can get lost sometimes on the detours because you may feel shame about those things or disappointment or things that you wish you could do different. He said, but I want you to know the things that I see, or where I can look at you where you are now and see where you could have been derailed by those detours.
Yeah.
And I see someone who's overcome those things, those mistakes. And so those are the things that inspire me. So the whole point of that saying that, and everything with your relationship with Ethan, with your, if you've got kids that age, man, staying in that real honest place, letting them watch your journey.
Yeah.
For all the positives and negatives, and seeing the struggle with, you don't get the yeses that you want, or you don't get to build the house you want, or whatever. Or when you do, when you can revisit the guy who's picking up trash and stuff, those are the things that let them know, okay, I mean, that's what kind of makes you a hero with your kids, because ultimately they're looking for someone who's finding balance and all that stuff. And it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. I mean, I'm a work in progress on it. I certainly haven't figured it out.
I definitely am. And it's, I look back at some of the things I've done and said, and I'm like, such an idiot. Oh my gosh. And he's such an amazing person. And we've got the daughter who just turned 1.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It's, I'm amazed. All I know, everybody's like, man, he's such a good kid. I'm like, so my wife and my mother is our main source of childcare. I was like, my wife and my mother raised extremely amazing kids.
The same thing. Thank their mom. Well, I think too that, man, we live in a day and age that's really built around comparison.
Yeah. And
the social media world is really everybody's kind of presenting their best self. And so
that's a good one.
For me as a songwriter, man, you deal with if you're on social media all the time, you're seeing who all got cuts on a record you didn't get a cut on, who's got a single that you didn't get, all that stuff. And if you buy into all that and live in that, man, God, they got such a perfect house. Look at their kids; they're so dressed. Man, how'd they get a Range Rover? I'm still driving, like all that stuff. And I think, man, we just you got to step away from that. You have to kind of not be driven by that, and teach your kids to not be driven by that. It's hard. It's really, really hard. But anyway, I think I would encourage you to be at a place too of being able to credit yourself. You're a big part of why Ethan's like he is too. And there's no question.
Well, I appreciate that. He's being a parent's the greatest gift God ever gave me. That's for dang sure.
Same here.
Well, dude, it's been so cool. Like, so I was unbelievably fortunate especially as a teenager. Because Dad owned the business, Mom worked there a long time. I was there all the time. So, and like you said, I heard everything, and I still can remember so much. I tell Dad stories. I'm like, you remember this? I told Charlie Monk a story. He was like, I don't even remember that, but I'm sure I said that.
Yep.
And like, I just remember everything. But watching you guys literally grow up, now that learning to be a businessman, being self-employed, and all those things, I'm just so amazed at like what somebody like you can take, literally like a pen and a piece of paper. You got to have a certain mindset. You have to have a certain mindset to be able to just keep going and rocking and rolling, reinventing yourself, staying relevant, being inspired. I can get frustrated and get mad and just go do things. You have to be able, you create. So like you have to have a certain level of consciousness.
Well, I think that, for anybody that's a creative in terms of art, whether you paint, you write, you play, whatever it is, man, when you're in the middle of that, those are two separate worlds, right? I mean, like, you have to be able to lay the business down, and for the next few hours while I'm working on this is really all about the song. And a great song, you learn as a songwriter just the power of a great song. I mean, it's like we've seen numerous, without naming names, like mediocre artists have a career, or at least a period of time of a career, because of a great song. And then I've seen so many incredible artists come through this town that are great singers that for some reason just could not write or latch onto the great song. And then the other side of that, man, is like all we can control is all we can control. And what, on the creative side, in this room while I'm sitting there with my guitar or the pen and paper, my computer or whatever, I can't control any outside things. And once I finish that, then it's on the next step that if I'm hiring players to play on it, I have to be wise to choose the right guys. But at the end of the day, ultimately, if it goes everywhere I want it to go and it lands on a record, just like with you, then it becomes to the people outside there. Like it's not, you may be the greatest salesman in the world, but if you don't have contacts, if you don't have people to go sell it to, it means nothing.
Boom.
So then, man, all you can do is do the work. I guess that's the bottom line,
Relationships, contacts, lead the contracts, baby.
That's exactly right. Right.
My dad used to always say, talking about guys that should have made it and some that and the ones that should didn't. He used to, especially in the late '90s, he used to look at me and be like, Dwight Yoakam is one of the smartest, brightest people ever. And I'm like, well, why? And he said, well, he's going bald. Most women would not consider him an attractive guy, and he's not considered a great singer either. Yeah. Yet he's doing movies in Hollywood. He's extremely talented, just not what your cookie cutter person would look like. So here he is. He's in movies, and he's great at it.
Yep.
What he does musically, he's great at it.
Yep.
He's super brandable, like too tight jeans, like the whole nine.
Yep.
And it just totally worked. And he was like, that guy's smart. So my whole life I've been like watching what Dwight Yoakam does and be like, now how'd he do that?
He's memorable. That's the thing. He's
there.
memorable.
It is.
I tell young artists all the time, I'll get like some beautiful young 23-year-old blonde girl with a big voice, whatever. And all that's in my mind the whole time is we've already got Carrie Underwood.
That's
what do you do that's different? And I'll tell them all the time, man, it's like finding your lane. You're thinking about Dwight Yoakam reminds me, this is probably a little inappropriate. One of the funniest stories ever. So your dad was very aware of Kenny Chesney back in the day. And look, Kenny was a guy who was like 5'7".
Yeah.
Mullet, hat.
He didn't look like what he does today.
Perceived as kind of an okay singer, like whatever. Nobody looked at that guy and said, that dude's a star at all. And so a buddy of mine that I won't mention his name, but his son had a shooting accident with a gun went off, and he shot himself about an inch from his private part.
Oh, man.
So my buddy happens to be a really off-the-cuff funny guy, and he goes to visit his son in the hospital, and he's talking to him, and he goes, let me see where this is. And so he sees where the wound is. He goes, son, you are the luckiest. Well, other than Kenny Chesney, you're the luckiest guy on the planet. But yeah, man, there's a star quality. I will say this, man. I tell people all the time, I remember it with Kenny Chesney, Tim McGraw. Some people enter our room and the presence is just something feels different.
They say that about The Rock.
Yeah, absolutely.
He just walks in and makes you feel a certain way.
Leslie Jordan has that. I've been in rooms. He's tiny. He's just got this thing. And Dwight Yoakam has that. He is a rock star, man. And so
that's so cool.
Finding your thing that you do that nobody else does.
Bam.
That's the thing.
That's what Charlie, when Charlie Monk was in here, he just kept saying the word authenticity over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's awesome. As a matter of fact, DJ Silver, Ace and Diana, when they were here, talked about that. Emily with talking PR when she was in here, she was like, "We're looking for authenticity."
Yeah.
Like that's what at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
Bam.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can, sometimes you can sneak by on faking it.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a lasting thing. The real money thing is, the grand slam in our business is if I find someone who's a pretty good singer that knows who they are and knows what songs, either they write the songs that are really authentic and real to them, not to anybody else, or they can find those songs. That's really the money thing. Like and then it works. That's the thing we're all looking for. People can love or hate Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift filled a lane. Like, she is what she is.
Yep.
And we don't need a Florida Georgia line.
Yep.
It's a very specific mix between those two guys that creates the FGL sound. And nobody else sounds like that.
That's right.
And that's just the magic of it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, man, speaking of Taylor Swift, there was my daughter is just the cutest thing ever, and she's got this little Coco Melon doll that she loves, and Taylor Swift. So Alexa was just playing a country playlist, and Taylor Swift came on. What was her hit that she had? The one that that The Rock was dancing to. What was the name of that song?
Oh gosh, I don't know which song it was. I don't know if it's "We're Never Getting Back Together." I don't know which one he was.
It wasn't the country. It was like one of her more recent pop ones. That all the girls have had the tuba sound in it and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, is that the one with the goat?
I think yes, that's right.
Trouble.
I think that's it. I think that's
so.
it. Well, it's playing in there,
yeah.
and my daughter's just in there, the other doll, and she's just bopping around, and my daughter's like, or my wife was just like, Taylor Swift, she's on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's incredible.
It'd be amazing. It would be really incredible to know how many young girls sit in a room with an acoustic guitar these days because of Taylor Swift.
Is that true, Fiona? Fiona's an amazing
There'll be a
singer.
million of them.
Well, Taylor Swift was the reason I started songwriting.
I believe it.
Fiona's an amazing singer.
Yeah, we're going to see in the next 5-8 years, whether it's a Billie Eilish kind of, there's going to be somebody that's going to be. I was 9 years old and went to Taylor Swift concert. I picked up a guitar, and
awesome.
now I'm on the Grammy stage. It all feeds in.
I hope one day somebody says that about me, about their business or something like that. You know?
And that's absolutely look. The thing to kind of toot your horn a little bit. What I love about you is with what you're doing here. Look, there's a lot of people who out and just go sell insurance or do whatever they do. You are trying to figure out a way to champion other people's lives. And ultimately that says a lot about you, that it's what you want to make money, you want to be successful, no question. And that's great. But you could be on a track that just says, if I can go get the biggest house and the best car, all the stuff.
Yeah.
But it's important to you to feed the things that you've learned, even through the
100%.
mistakes you've made, into other people's lives and see them. I'm the same way. Like the greatest thing to me would be to have somebody on a CMA or Grammy stage and go, man, there's this one guy.
Yep.
Even if I never had another hit, there's one guy when nobody else. There's one guy that believed in me, taught me how to write a song.
That's right.
That's the coolest thing.
That's right. That's right. Well, Danny, is there anything else that we left out today, that any stories, anything that stands out? I mean, you've been having hits for a long time. You've been hanging out with some of the coolest folks in entertainment, working with them. I mean, not many. Everybody wants to hang out with Leslie Jordan, and you get to do that. You know what I mean? And
believe me, I hear it all the time. It's all in my DMs all the time. Man, selfishly, I'd love to direct everybody to my record. It's called King of Jones County.
It's fantastic.
Go check it out, and thank you. It's just excuse me, for the first time since Western Flyer days, I would frequently comment when I was playing songwriter rounds that I basically, learned how to try to write songs for everybody else. I completely forgot my artist self. And so that was really in the middle of the COVID thing. I said, they're all 100% songs that I wrote myself, kind of about the world that I grew up in. And then it has the song It Is Well With My Soul with Me and My Brothers. It's an a cappella live thing. And then secondly, if you haven't checked out the Leslie Jordan Company's Coming record, you really should check it out. It's really, really great. There's some incredible performances It to me is the perfect like Sunday morning, get a cup of coffee, get just a little bit of like a gospel vibe going on. But hearing Chris Stapleton hit the last chorus of Farther Along is like otherworldly. And so yeah, that. And then, no, I mean, I think the one thing that I just would encourage any of your listeners to is, to do is just, the authenticity thing is really important. Know what you do, that you do really, really well. And don't be afraid to double down on that and get better where you need to get better. But we all have, there are different things that other people maybe do better than you, that they're really gifted at that maybe you're not. Don't get caught up on that. Spend the time on the things that you can do well and be the best you can be doing that one thing that you do that nobody else does. And yeah, don't be afraid to start over, That
is fantastic. Any, folks can keep up with all your upcoming gigs on your social, right?
Yep. And I don't have a really busy touring schedule. Some of the things I play are private things, but if there's anything that is open to the public, people can come to, I'll post it online. Not on Facebook a whole lot. I'm typically on Instagram more than anything else, and I'll post the upcoming things. But I do a show for anybody that's on the West Coast. Me and my buddy Travis Howard do a show at Hotel Cafe once a month called Gold Rush Roots Revival, and it's just kind of bringing
I love that.
roots music to Hollywood, right in the middle of Hollywood. And then we do hit songwriter show. A buddy of mine out there is doing a thing called Songwriter Sundays in Huntington Beach, California, and once a month we do a Nashville Unplugged. That's hit songwriters from Nashville playing that thing.
That's awesome.
So if you're out on the West Coast, come check out one of those shows. And then there's a bunch of songwriter festivals we're out at. We'll post them all as we go. And yeah, man, come see us on the road. And,
Fantastic. All right. So on Instagram, it's Instagram.com. You are / Danny Myrick.
But both that and Facebook are just Danny Myrick. Same way on Twitter.
Yep.
Twitter's a little bit more, I'll interact on, sports stuff going on.
Yep.
I'll make snide comments that, I get myself in trouble on Twitter. But man,
that's what it's for.
That's what it's for. It's so fun.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, dude, like seriously, I can't tell you how big of an impact watching your journey along the way. It's just such an inspiration knowing how many times you've been knocked down, got back up stronger. Every single time you came back, reinvented yourself, you came back stronger than you were before. I mean, seriously, all those guys on the wall you mentioned that had singles, had record deals, and they're not in the music business anymore.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So,
thank you for saying that. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't say, number one, I'm so grateful. Just again, shout out your dad. I mean, Mickey Hyder, we absolutely we would never have had a record deal without him, and seeing a vision there. And it's fun for me to watch what you're doing with your life from just seeing his little towhead catcher back in the day. And
that's right.
But I'm really, really proud of what you've done, and with your family and your business, it's all great. So.
Well, thank you so much, man. And again, it was such a treat to get you on. I can't thank you enough for coming and hanging.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Again, we do have the greatest freaking listeners in the world. We got to come up with a name for them. They need a name. They totally need a name. So you guys can.
Is it the Hitstreakers? Is that who they are?
Oh, that's right.
Pretty good.
That totally fits the Hyder thing.
If you're going to be a streaker, be a Hitstreaker.
That's right. Oh, I think we just figured it out, didn't we?
If the music career ends, I'm going into marketing. I actually do pretty well with that. So.
You should. You absolutely should. Well,
I want to see the logo for your Hitstreakers. I'm scared of that.
Well, I guess the only thing you'll be wearing is headphones.
There you go. That's all you need, right? All you need to be on this show is headphones.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
The naked truth.
Oh man! Well, Danny, again, thank you so much. It was a true pleasure to have you on.
You too.
I'll be hitting you guys up to get your wife on here as well.
Let's do it.
Just because, and like I say, she's a rock star in her own right.
She is, man. She don't need
Fantastic.
me, that's for sure. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, once again, thanks so much to Danny Myrick for hanging on. Make sure you check him out on social media, Instagram.com/ Danny Myrick. Same on Facebook and Twitter. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of The Hit Streak. I am your man, Nick Hyder. God bless.